nice to be here. Thank you, Mataji, for this nice invitation. I've been here several times in the past, but not since COVID came. First time since the pandemic started. This question about why we should meditate, we have different ways of looking at this. I want to start out from the point of view of the jnani, and then mention briefly also from the point of view of the devotee. Swami Vivekananda makes a very beautiful statement. I won't be quoting it exactly, but something like, meditation is the one time that we can be who we really are. Okay. The one time that we can be who we really are, where we can get rid of all of these false coverings and upadhis and everything, and really feel ourselves to be the real self, the self that transcends all of the different coverings that we have. So what we find in Jnana Yoga is a lot of very brilliant types of reasoning. It's called Vichara Marga, this path of reasoning, where we analyze the nature of the self, and we come to the conclusion that the self is something different from all the coverings that we have. In meditation, we can actually peel away these coverings. We do it intellectually through this Jnana Yoga, but in meditation, we can actually go stage by stage and transcend these different upadhis. Most of this is based on a theory called the Panchakosha doctrine. This Panchakosha doctrine we find in the early Upanishads, the Taittiriya Upanishad and Viveka Chudamani. There's a long section about these 5 coverings, Panchakosha. And it starts out with this physical body, Annamaya Kosha, that this is the outermost covering. Sri Ramakrishna explains it in terms of the onion, that if you take an onion, there'll be a hard kind of reddish or brownish outer cover, and you peel that off first. Then under that, they'll be progressively more interior and finer. So we peel off one, we peel off the other, in hopes of finding the real self inside. When we peel everything away, we find that there's not anything inside, but it was this infinite absolute space that seems to be, because it's covered by everything, seems to be dwelling within the heart. But then we realize it is infinite and absolute. So we start out with this Annamaya Kosha, this physical body, and we ask ourselves each time the question, am I the body? And we discover at some point that we can think of ourselves from a psychological point of view and also from a metaphysical point of view. Psychological point of view, myself, sense of identification is very much tied in with the body. It's very much tied in with my appearance and my physical capability, or all different things. But from a higher point of view, I look and see that this body has changed from the time I was a small child to the present, and I feel that I am the same person, that I've been the witness of it. I've been watching the whole thing change and grow. If something happens to this physical body, if I lose a limb, something like that, I'm the same person. I'm not a different person. I think sometimes if someone were to have a terrible car accident and they're in the hospital and they had to have all new body parts and even the face, sometimes they can do these face transplants nowadays, or even get somebody else's body. When the person wakes up, before looking in the mirror, that person will have no idea that it's a different body. It'll be the same person. Then looks in the mirror, then they'll find out something different. Can I tell that joke that I told yesterday? Okay. This is a Sardarji joke. Now, the Sardarjis, the Sikhs, I have great respect for them. They're wonderful people. Unfortunately, they've become the butt of jokes. So if anybody, don't think that I have any lack of respect, but there's a Vedantic point of view to this story. It's a nice joke. Swami Swananji used to tell this. There was a Sardarji on a train, and he had to get off on a stop in his village, a small stop, was feeling very sleepy and was afraid that he would fall asleep and miss his stop. So there was a man sitting across from him, and he said, "Can you wake me when we get to this station?" And the man said, "Yes." And then he said, "I'll give you 10 rupees. Of course, today 10 rupees is nothing. Those days, "I'll give you 10 rupees if you wake me up." So the man said, "Okay." So the Siddharthi fell asleep, and this man thought, just to wake him up is unfair, taking his 10 rupees. I should do something for him. This man happened to be a barber. So he said, "Let me give him a shave." So while the Siddharthi is sleeping, he shaves his whole beard off, and without him knowing it all. And then he wakes him up and says, "This is your stop." And the Siddharthi says, "Thank you very much," and gives him his 10 rupees. Then he goes home and he goes in and he sees his face in the mirror. And he doesn't recognize it. The face is clean shaven. He hasn't seen that his whole life. And he gets very angry. And he says, "That rascal, I gave him 10 rupees. He woke up the wrong person." Now, if we analyze, why is it funny? It's funny because we'll never think that it could possibly be the wrong person. We'll always think that, "Oh, what happened? I don't look the same. Or he shaved my beard," something like that. So our sense of identity is, on the psychological level, very much tied in with this body. For Siddharthi to have the beard is a very important thing. But we always know that I'm something other than that. And then we go from that to pranamaya kosha, to the senses. We go to manomaya kosha, buddhimaya kosha. So if I lose my sense of hearing, my sense of sight, I'm the same person. I'll never think that I'm somebody else. This happens when we get older. All of the senses start to go and everything. Then manomaya kosha, the mind. We can have a complete transformation of our way of thinking. That someone can say, "My whole life I was a complete atheist. I didn't believe in anything, and I met this great soul and everything changed, and now my whole life is devotion to God." But in the same person, the same I who used to be an atheist, and now I'm a devout bhakta. The same I is there. And then buddhi. The buddhi and manas are not very much different, but making all the decisions about what to do, our decision-making capacity may change also. And then anandamaya kosha, this whole storehouse of memory, of impressions and everything, that can also change. That I can feel that, yes, I used to get angry very easily. I had that tendency. I was a very tamasic person. And then one day we find that we've transformed ourselves, but we know that I'm the same person that I was before. So this is all through reasoning that we analyze that I am the one who's been present throughout this whole process of change as the witnessing consciousness. And we can also analyze in terms of, I'm the possessor of the body, so I'm not the body, possessor of the mind, so I'm not the mind, or the witness of the body, so I'm not the body. We have different ways of analyzing this, but it's all analysis, vichara marga. In meditation, we can actually peel these away. When we sit for meditation and we start with pratyahara, we withdraw the mind from the senses and from the body, we can really sit there, forget we have a physical body. Now, somebody can say, "You still have a body." I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about sense of identity. So I feel that I still exist, even though I've forgotten this body. Whole mind is lost in this process of picturing the chosen deity and repeating the mantra and everything. And then the mind can get very still and very quiet when we reach that near vritti state. The mind is not functioning. I find that I still exist, that I'm something other than the mind. I still exist. I don't cease to have any experience. The mind becomes very still and very quiet. And if the conscious mind is still and quiet, the subconscious mind is not functioning. It's not feeding any ideas or desires into the mind. So then I've transcended all of these 5 coverings, and I can really feel myself to be what I really am, which is just pure consciousness. Pure consciousness, when there's something to be witnessed, is the witness. When there's nothing to be witnessed, it doesn't disappear. See, we have subject and object, that relationship. There won't be a subject without an object. But if the object disappears, the subjective side disappears, but that subject becomes just pure awareness. Even without anything, it doesn't disappear. This is why that state of samadhi is not just a blank, empty state. So this is why the jnani will practice meditation to experience the truth that I am none of these coverings. They call them upadhi. Upadhi means something that's superimposed. Just as I'm wearing this cloth, this is also an upadhi. Anything that you add on to me is an upadhi. You give me the name Swami, that's an upadhi. Ananda, added to the name. These are all superficial, secondary things, very important to me, psychologically. But my sense of I is something different from all of that. So this is for the jnani. For the bhakta wants to experience the truth of the indwelling presence within. Now, Sri Ramakrishna, he was a brilliant psychologist, in addition to philosopher and, of course, God-realized soul. But he understood that no matter how much we reason away the sense of ego, the sense of I, that it comes back. So the devotee says, okay, let that I be there and let there be a relationship. So Sri Ramakrishna says this ego, it's like a stick on the surface of water. We do this with each other, we realize that there's only the ocean. But when there's I is there, we realize that this is seemingly separating ourselves from God. And that witnessing consciousness within, we put on one side, we put ourselves on the other side, and we look upon that as the antaryami, as the inner controller, the inner guide, Ishvara dwelling within the heart. Because this pure consciousness, this witnessing consciousness, has no I in it. So it's not that I am that, of course I am that, but there's no ego center to it. So it can equally be described as I or thou. This depends on our standpoint. The devotee prefers to think of it that way. Swami Krishna, I always like this statement. He said, sometimes when I look inside of myself, I say there are two there. The Divine Mother is there and her child is there. That means him. That means that ripe ego, that ripe I. As long as the child is there, then the Divine Mother is there with a sense of otherness, but connectedness. So the little bit of a dualistic attitude superimposed on this ocean of consciousness. So when the devotee practices this meditation, it's to feel that this whatever aspect of God one is worshiping is not separate from us. It's our very own self, dwelling within, the mover of this machine, the real witness within. This witness, this sakshi. This sakshi, it's such an interesting concept because equally applies to Ishvara and to Atman, to the self. The jnani will say, yes, I've been observing everything my whole lifetime. I'm that real self. The devotee will say, God has been within my heart throughout my whole life. That when the prayer is uttered within, the sakshi, capital S, capital W witness, has been observing, hearing all of my prayers, knowing my every movement. So the why for the devotee is to feel that living, pulsating, real, indwelling presence of the Lord within the heart. So these are the two whys for the jnani and for the bhakta. Now, I'm just going to very briefly talk about the how, just one aspect of it, that how do we go about concentrating the mind, whether we're doing it from this intellectual, half-intellectual point of view and the devotional point of view, because the mind is always wandering. Arjuna makes that great statement in the Gita that it's like trying to control the wind. Try to catch the wind in a net. It seems to be almost impossible. And Sri Krishna tells him that, yes, without a doubt, you're right. It is very, very difficult, but it can be done. And he gives two very important pieces of advice, and Sri Ramakrishna makes it three pieces. So the first thing is Abhyasa Yoga, and this is the hard part. that we have to be steadfast. We have to be willing to fight with the mind, keep bringing the mind back when the mind feels the desire to wander and think of planning for the day and all sorts of old memories, old nice things to think about, old grudges to bring back to the mind, or whatever the mind does, all sorts of funny things that we have to keep bringing it back. It wanders, we bring it back. This is Abhyasa Yoga. We keep doing that. Now, if this is our only tool, we'll fail. We won't be successful because we don't have that power to keep bringing the mind back unless two things take place. One, we're bringing it back to something that is a tremendous source of attraction. And what we're pulling it away from is losing its sense of attraction. So vairagya, first abhyasa, and then vairagya. That means that we start to, the world loses its fascination for us. That all of the things that attract us, we start to feel are not so valuable. That in this lifetime, they come and they go. We get attached to them. They just cause problems for us. So we try to limit all of that. Now, Sri Ramakrishna says that this also won't work. Because if all we have is trying to push the world away, the world is too strong. It'll keep coming back. He said we need anuraga. So if you read in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, almost every time he talks about vairagya, he brings in anuraga, tremendous love for the ideal, love for God. So the problem is this world is like a small magnet and God is a huge magnet, but we're very close to the small one. If we can go a little bit in this direction, feel that pull, we get close enough, we'll get pulled in. But now we have to push away from this. But as Ramakrishna says, don't think about pushing, think about going in the other direction. He always emphasizes that positive aspect. One of our Swamis, I've heard this story different times, Swami Virajanandaji, maybe others also, there's a very nice statement that they made when the people would say, "Oh, Swami, how great you are, how great is your renunciation?" He would say, "Why, yours is greater." And they would say, "Well, how do you say that ours is greater? You've given up everything for God." He said, "Yes, I've given up a very small thing for something very great. You've given up something very great. You're not going for God, you're going for the world, for something small. Your renunciation is greater because you've given up something greater. I've given up something very small and insignificant." It's a humorous way of putting it. But if we develop that love for the ideal, then it becomes natural. This renunciation becomes something easy and natural. Otherwise, it's always fighting. So the real or the most important element in meditation is not meditation itself. It's in convincing the mind or letting the mind develop a taste for the divine. And when that taste comes, then the desire comes to keep going closer and closer. And then that magnet takes over. Then we get pulled closer and closer to that. So the how of meditation is we have to be regular. We have to really devote time to it. It has to be a high priority for us. But the rest of the time, the mind has to be soaked in the presence of God, soaked in the thought of God. And especially with this idea of the Ishta Devata. We worship Sri Ramakrishna, our Holy Mother, then we have to immerse the mind in that thought. The more we read about them, the more we think about them, the more we go to places associated with them, that desire will come. And the more real they'll feel to us. We'll feel that they're always with us. This idea of Leela, we have this idea of Leela, this divine play that took place in the life of Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother, to feel that that's present now. There's a type of Nitya Leela. The Vaishnava tradition, there's this idea of the Nitya Vrindavan, that play that Sri Krishna took with the gopis and everything, that's going on now in a divine realm. We can also feel that this divine play of Sri Ramakrishna that it's still taking place, that all the devotees go into his room and Dakshineshwar, and we can go there and in meditation, we can sit there and the joy that comes from that, this will bring this anuraga, this will bring this desire to go and participate in that lila at the time of meditation. Then this will be a great help. Otherwise, the mind is not strong enough. The mind isn't strong enough to just tell the mind, okay, you're not going to think of this, you're going to think of that. It'll rebel. It won't. But if we keep feeding the mind, take a taste of this, and the mind says, that's wonderful. This is the definition, of sattvic happiness. In the beginning, it's not very tasty, but the more we go on, the more it tastes like nectar. And once we get this ruchi, they talk about name ruchi, the taste for the divine name, the taste for spiritual practice and meditation, then the how of meditation becomes much, much easier. We won't be 100% successful, but the chances that the mind can get fixed in meditation are much greater. Now, one other thing about meditation, we should never think that meditation means that we'll have perfect concentration for any long period of time. If for a few moments during, say we sit for a half hour, if there are a few moments that the mind gets gathered together, that we feel that divine presence is something real, that we feel some joy, then we know we've had a fantastic meditation. And that will linger, and we'll want the taste of that again. So we have a little bit of this philosophical idea behind why we should meditate from the point of view of the jnani, from the point of view of the bhakta, both. And there's a how of meditation, even for the jnani. There has to be this tremendous pull, tremendous longing for truth, to know who I am, to get rid of this false baggage that we're carrying around, this body, mind, senses, and everything, to be free from that. That also has to be a type of anuraga. So this is a very brief way of trying to answer these two things, meditation, how and why. So do we want questions now, or?
How would you like to do? Would you like to speak and then we can take questions together? How would you like? Anybody online have any questions?
Colin.
And there are devotees who assume God is outside. So how will you reconcile these two types of devotions?
Yeah, the question is that we have different ways of conceiving of the personal God. Personal God, of course, in very dualistic traditions, personal God can be dwelling in Vaikuntha, Kailash, something like that. Or at least the personal God we can think of as the controller of the universe, dwelling within the heart of everything, not necessarily as the Antaryami, as dwelling within. Sri Ramakrishna's teachings on bhakti emphasize the indwelling presence. We may say God is both within and without, but our access point is within. So this is why another very brilliant statement he makes when he gives the illustration to the sun reflected in the containers of water, that he says, the sun may be there, that's true, that's the real sun, but how do we see that real sun? Through the reflection, dwelling within the heart. Otherwise, we can't do it. We can't gaze directly at that real sun. We see it as it reflects within. So God is both within and without. Those who think that God is only outside in some far distant place, Sri Ramakrishna says, is the lowest type of devotion. And we can start with that, but this love and devotion, he says, like a cord, brings us closer and closer, and we realize that what we're worshiping outside of it is really within. Swamiji emphasizes so many times that God we're searching here and there, running around in churches and temples and mosques and everything, dwells within our very own heart as the real self within. So for those devotees who think of God as separate, say our conception of God as the avatar. I want to worship Sri Ramakrishna. I don't want to think that he's dwelling within my heart. I like that, the historical, I like that personality. It appeals to me very much. we can also do that, meditate on that. But at some point, we have to feel a connection. So Sri Ramakrishna, he emphasizes this idea of having a certain bhava. That means a relationship. So even if it's dualistic, there has to be that relationship, that mother to child or friend to friend, whatever it is, master to servant, that relationship will be some connection, some connection. If we think God's completely separate from us and far from us, it's very hard to really, for that devotion to really ripen. And this is why Sri Ramakrishna, he teaches, he emphasizes the path of devotion without being a dualist. I mentioned it here. There's a very nice statement by Swami Atmajnanananda. He said that the monks of the Ramakrishna or devotees of the Ramakrishna order, they're Advaitavadins, but Dvaitakarins. That means from a practical point of view, we accept the relationship and some sense of separation. Philosophically, we understand that there's oneness. So this is that same idea. We accept the reality that the stick of ego is there, that sense of I is going to come. So we say, okay, then we'll accept that and we'll establish a relationship. That a rascal remain as a servant of God, like that. So those who worship God as some separate somehow, they at least should feel that reflection of that divine within the heart, dwelling outside, of course, and inside. Both. When we say that Ishvara dwells within the heart, he dwells within the heart. It doesn't mean he's not the ground of the whole universe as well. It's not just within the heart. So both within and without. We try to have that type of attitude. Yeah, I think that best to stick with one meditative practice or technique or something like that. Or I think we have to give ourselves a little bit of leeway within parameters. So not that we're jumping from one thing to another, but if our meditation, the teachings that we get, instructions that we get, or mostly the mantra and the Ishta Devata. So we have a mantra to repeat, and that mantra will contain the name of God in the form that we choose to worship. That within that framework, we don't give up the mantra, we don't give up the Ishta Devata, but within that framework, that sometimes we'll try to think who is the witness and watching. What I said in the beginning, sometimes we can think from a devotional point of view, from a Leela point of view. Swami Sarvadevananda spoke about this beautifully in Houston. It's still online there, and maybe he'll speak about it tonight. So we have to give ourselves a little leeway. Sometimes we're in a different mood. Sometimes we feel very devotional, sometimes a little analytical. So within the parameters, so we don't want to jump from one thing to another, to stick with our regular meditation. But when the mind wanders, keep it within a certain framework, within a certain circle, and not let it stray too far away from that. But sometimes we have to give it a little freedom, because the mind likes to run around a little bit. Yeah. Yeah. Mm.
How can we do that? And also, we should give ourselves, we actually very drawn to spiritual, but then there are things, I think it's dependent on the circumstances.
Okay, two questions. One is, how do we develop this ruti, the taste for not just the divine name, the taste for spiritual practice and spiritual life and everything? And I think the best and easiest way is holy company. because we have to see that how the spiritual practice, how leading a life completely dedicated to God, how it manifests in somebody's life. And when we see the calmness and the peace and the joy and the patience and forbearance and contentment, all of these divine qualities, when we see them manifest in the life of somebody who's devoted his whole life to spiritual practice, then the desire comes for us to also be able to achieve that. Now, what do we do when there are times when we don't feel that inspiration, when it seems a little dry? We persevere. We know that there'll be times when we feel a tremendous amount of joy and inspiration. There'll be dry periods. We have to just fight through the dry periods. That Swami Krishna, he compares somebody who takes up farming as a hobby and someone who's been a family of farmers for generation after generation. That if we're just taking it up as a hobby, if we have a bad crop one year, we give it up. But those who know nothing but farming, whether it's a good crop or a bad crop, this is all they do. This is their life. They'll continue to do it and try their best, and they'll get a good crop eventually. So we have to try to convince ourselves that there's a dry period will be followed by an inspirational period, and we shouldn't give up because everybody goes through these stages. We shouldn't give up. If our meditation becomes very dry and almost painful, then we can do some spiritual reading or listen to some talk, do something else, or do more japa rather than meditation. We don't want to push so much sometimes that the mind has a negative reaction. We have to be a little bit cautious about that, but otherwise, we shouldn't give in too easily to that mind. And sometimes we sit for meditation and we feel everything is dry, and then for some reason, at the end, the mind gets lifted up a little bit. And we think, oh, it's good that I didn't skip it this morning. I would have missed this. So we have to keep that faith a little bit that there can be a breakthrough at any time, even when we don't feel. And the morning that we don't feel inspired to do meditation, that may have been the morning that we have some experience. So we have to give ourselves the chance at least. And sometimes we just have to, fight through it. Sometimes it's like chewing stones, or meditation. But the fruits come. I have this great conviction that we gain as much through these difficult meditations as we do through easy meditations. That some sense of real devotion, that sense of real determination. That yes, I was able to not give up my spiritual practice even when I wasn't feeling that inspiration or anything. That we get a tremendous feeling of yes, I was willing to do whatever it took. So there's some benefit to all of that. We should never think that, oh, I just wasted my morning. The mind was wandering all over. The mere fact that we sit and struggle, that mere fact is not only a sign of devotion, but it increases our devotion. So we should struggle a little bit through it, but as I say, don't let it become such a negative thing that at some point we just give it up. Then we've lost everything. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everyone.